You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and, well, joining me on this episode will be Joe Hogan, but he is currently not here because I'm recording this intro on my own. If you listened to last week's episode, you know that I cut it off about halfway through, and this episode is the rest of that conversation. So, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, definitely go back right now, listen to that one first, and then this one is going to pick up quite literally right where that one left off. And yeah, we get into which Star Wars medium is our favorite, which one we think is best suited for telling stories in the Star Wars galaxy. So here is the rest of that conversation now. I think like in between the TV and movies and video games are comics and books, like novels, and I think that those are interchangeable depending on, you know, which time period we're talking about. But with comics, I'll just make a really quick distinction. I think the long form comic book storytelling, so ongoing month to month issues, is a terrible way to do Star Wars because it requires you um, to fill the story. And the way that they have done that with Marvel in the Disney era is to take a time period that is very constrained and take multiple years to tell stories in that time period that could not possibly have taken place, just like from the get-go, from the jump. Like now, if you want to establish in some way, visually or through the story, that hey, these are not canon, this is us just having fun, then that's fine. But that's not what they have done. They have made a very concerted effort to tell you that it's canon. They have used the comics to introduce ideas into canon, that then get supported by TV shows and movies. And that's intermingled with Luke Skywalker fighting Darth Vader mere hours after the Battle of Yavin on Yavin, right? On the back of a speeder bike, clashing lightsabers with Darth Vader. No, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. It's not in continuity. That didn't happen. There's nothing that you can tell me. I don't care what Marvel says or what Disney says about what is and is not canon. There's no way that that happened. And then Empire Strikes Back happens the way that it does. It just makes absolutely no sense. It's complete nonsense. And if you want to tell those stories, that's fine by me. Like that's like it. If you want to have fun with it that way, if you want Luke Skywalker to go up against Boba Fett literally days after the Battle of Yavin, then that's fine. You can do that. But just like, you know, it's about as much canon as the holiday special is, as far as I'm concerned. But unfortunately, that is also intermingled with like the Lando miniseries, which is actually a fantastic miniseries that explores that character, and gives us the backstory for Lobot that is absolutely canon as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, and does what it's supposed to do. It makes the Empire Strikes Back better. So now when I watch Empire and I'm thinking about Lobot's not just a dude with robot things on the side of his head. He is one of Lando's most loyal friends, and like the reason why he ends up the way that he does is a sacrifice. It's a choice that he made. It's actually not a happy story, right? that the origin story for Lobot is actually heartbreaking. So the comics can do that, and they do it to great effect. And there are some amazing Star Wars stories within the comics, but then there are also places where the comics just absolutely shit the bed. And like I have not like War of the Bounty Hunters, Crimson Reign, and the ongoing Star Wars comic are all take place in between Empire and Jedi, and it makes no sense how all of this stuff could happen. Right? Shadows of the Empire isn't, I would say, a stretch, but like it's a lot. Shadows of the Empire puts a lot of action between Empire and Jedi that um on the one hand absolutely informs the character growth that we see that happened off screen in between films, but also is like, wait, so like Boba left Bespin with Han, and instead of like going straight to Jabba, he went and did some errands first, and through the process of that, like, because doesn't Slave One get blown up at some point? Like, I know the Houndstooth does, like Bosk's ship does.
Yeah, because he gets the Slave 2 and I think the Slave 4 at some
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
yeah, like because there's a moment in the, I think it was in the comic where one ship gets blown up. I don't remember if it's Slave One or the Houndstooth. I think it might be the Houndstooth, which is Bosk's ship, gets blown up, and because of the line where 3PO says, "Oh, they've frozen him in carbonite. He should be quite well protected in there." It was then like, "Oh, carbonite can withstand the explosion of a ship."
Mm.
So Bosk stole Han from Boba, and then I think it's Boba blows up the Houndstooth and then like snags
Yeah.
Han from the wreckage
Yeah, this was Shadows of the Empire, I
in
think?
Shadows. Yeah,
Okay.
like that's a lot to happen in what the movies establish is like Boba leaves Bespin and takes Han to Jabba. Like, there's nothing in the films to suggest that anything else happened.
Mm.
There's nothing in the films to suggest that other things didn't happen. But it is a little bit crazy. Although, like, I mean, it depends on how long we expect the time period in between films to be. I think when we look at A New Hope to Empire, there's at least a year in there, if not more. So you do have a little bit of leeway to tell some stories, to tell some fun stories. But with Empire to Jedi, it feels like a lot less time takes place, right? Because like you tell me that Boba dropped off Han and then just like, and he's just been hanging out on Tatooine for like a year, right? Um, so yeah, it's I don't know, but then like Outlaws also gets in on the action and is like, this is all taking place in the midst of everything else. But the great thing about Outlaws is that it's completely disconnected from the larger conflict, right? With the exception of one character showing up, everything else is like whatever. Um, could have happened at any point in time between Empire and Jedi. So, but the short form comic book stories, so one shots and limited series, mini series, have the ability to be some of the best Star Wars that you'll ever get, right? Um, but like Dark Empire is so good. I it's not canon anymore, but that doesn't matter. There's still great stories. Um, but yeah, like the ongoing stuff I think is very flawed in the way that they have decided to present it, because they present it as just Star Wars and then they act like this is what happened, and then you read it and you're like, there's no way that this is what happened. There is no way that all of this went down. And if some of this stuff happened, God, somebody would have said something in one of those movies, right? There's three of these movies. Somebody would have talked about that time that Luke did that, right? Like, I yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous, and also like really takes away from some of the impact of some of those characters. Boba Fett is not nearly as impressive of a character once he's been defeated by wet behind the ears, doesn't have any skills Luke Skywalker, right? Like like the only thing Luke is competent in A New Hope is piloting an X-wing. You really watch that movie, everything else he does, he's like, I think this is the part of the blaster that shoots. I'm pretty sure. But he doesn't really do anything. And he doesn't like they get to the bridge and he's shooting and he doesn't hit a single stormtrooper. Leia takes the thing from him and is like, bang, 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 3 guys dead, right? Like Leia knows what she's doing. Luke doesn't. He has no idea. He's like, I know, I'll use this rope to swing us across. Like he's he is the hero of the story, but he is far from impressive in that first one. It's not really until Return of the Jedi that we're like, oh my god, this Luke Skywalker guy can do some stuff. But in those other 2 movies, he's actually kind of a little bit hapless. is a little bit of a doofus, especially in A New Hope. So the idea that the Luke from A New Hope would jump on a speeder bike and then like charge Darth Vader, who like now we have the context of Darth Vader in Rogue One like decimating a bunch of rebel troops, and Luke just like zips by, whips out a lightsaber in front of Darth Vader, right? Like whips out a lightsaber in front of Vader, and then like bing bang, and Vader beats him. Like Vader knocks him off the speeder bike, and then Luke has to escape or whatever. But the fact that Luke would even attempt to do that in the first place, have the lack of insight, foresight, whatever kind of sight he requires to know that like, hey, that guy over there that killed Obi-Wan Kenobi is very dangerous. And you know, like a dark Jedi, he's got the big red lightsaber, run away. But that he would not pay attention to those instincts, and he would jump on a speeder bike and manage to actually like, you know, trade blows with Vader and then walk away from the situation. Completely absurd. And then like 2 issues later, because that's what incites Vader to go like, who was that with the lightsaber? Specifically my lightsaber. Right? Like put it together faster, Vader. And he hires Boba Fett to track down the person who blew up the Death Star, for Boba Fett to find out that kid you fought on Yavin with the lightsaber is the kid who blew up the Death Star, and his name is Luke Skywalker. And obviously Boba has no actually I shouldn't say obviously. I would, is because that's, I don't remember if that's in Star Wars or in Darth Vader. It's in one of the 2 comics. But I think that him hiring him is in Darth Vader, and then Luke fighting Boba is in the Star Wars comic. But I think there might be a little something that implies that Boba kind of knows, that Boba like gets it, like he puts it together that Anakin is Vader. But because he might have a little bit of that context from past experiences of who Anakin Skywalker is, and then you know who Darth Vader is, and connecting the 2 because he's Boba Fett and he's a smart guy like that. But yeah, anyways, like that, it's all like, it's just so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And then I haven't read the newer stuff, so I can't cite any of the specifics of what happens in the comics that are taking place between Empire and Jedi. I just know that like I see a cover every now and then, or I see like a panel or like a page or something like that somebody's posted on Twitter or Tumblr or something, right? And it's like, especially without context, which is not fair to it, but at the same time it's like, I think I have the context that I require to know where these sort of things fall. And it's like there's a story in the Star Wars, the current ongoing Star Wars, which is the one between Empire and Jedi, where Luke meditates. I think it's in relation to the lightsaber that he found or whatever. He's trying to like attune to the Kyber crystal or something like that, because he's using like a High Republic lightsaber, and it's with a yellow blade, because they had to instantly take that specialness away from Rey, and give it to Luke as well. So he's got this yellow lightsaber that he's using, and he's like meditating for some reason. And when he does, he goes into the Force, basically into the world between worlds, just by meditating, and meets one of the High Republic Jedi, like one of the ones from the High Republic comics, I think. It's like Elzar Man or something like that. Um, and like has a whole conversation with this Jedi in the Force, and it's like that's a lot. I think that's a lot for Luke to have done in between Return of the Jedi and Empire Strikes Back, for the character who kind of like is still, walking up to Yoda and being like, you lied to me. Why didn't you tell me? Or like, I guess he says that to Obi-Wan, but it's like, like, is Darth Vader my father? And it's like the reactions that he has in Return of the Jedi don't seem like the sort of things that somebody who's had like a weird, like, inside the Force sojourn, something that we've only really seen Yoda do before that. I mean, I guess Ezra as well, but um yeah, like, I don't know, it's just, it's a lot. It's a lot. The comics really push the boundaries of what's possible.
Mm.
And sometimes that's a good thing, but a lot of the times for me it's like, I think that you guys need to be kept in check a little bit more with the stories that you're telling, because some of them are just really out of pocket, and it's mostly that ongoing series. It really is,
Yeah.
like with the ongoing stuff, because like Rise of Kylo Ren, totally fine. Nothing in that story that's like, as a matter of fact, that story I think was really tame in terms of what it established in canon and in lore with the Knights of Ren. And it's like, I really would have enjoyed more depth to that. It's got the same problem that I think the TV shows can have, which is that like sometimes some stories are given 6 issues, some stories are given 4. I think Rise of Kylo Ren is a 4-issue mini, and it's like, you guys couldn't have given this 8. You guys couldn't have given this more. Like I think that this is actually a very important story to tell about the fall of Ben Solo and the rise of Kylo Ren, and you guys did it in 4. You did it in 4. You couldn't even give it a 6. But that's part of comic books nowadays, where it's like what used to be 6-issue miniseries, that used to be the way that they did it, and then you get your trade paperback. Now it's a 4-issue miniseries, which means it costs them 2 issues less to produce, but that trade paperback still going to be $25. Still going to be $25, which is an exorbitant price for a trade paperback. um I But yeah, like that's what Marvel absolutely loves to do these days. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I put comic books a little bit lower. Sort of those two things. It's constrained a lot by the medium. Comics are very expensive to produce, um, even though comic artists don't get paid enough, and then
Preach.
and then and then the comic book companies charge too much on the other side of it. Like it's such a, the fact that comic books still exist in 2024 at all is absurd, because as a business model it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. I don't know how these people make a living, other than the fact that they go to conventions and really like make their income there, because they're not getting it from the amount of hours that they're putting in to produce a 24-page story on a monthly basis. Like that's, these guys do not get paid enough. Guys, these people do not get paid enough, for the amount of work that they do and the skill that they have. But then, if they were getting paid enough, the comics would be like $12 an issue, right? So because God forbid, Marvel maybe, slim down and not have 15 EICs and managing editors and spiritual editors and copy, blah blah blah. Like the credits for comic books these days are insane, because most of the time is like, let's be real, who made this comic book? Like 3 people. Right. But who's getting paid the majority of the cost, like when it comes to the cost of an individual issue, it's like, who's responsible for the majority of that cost? The executives, right? Because they're getting paid 6-figure salaries to have opinions about artists' work. That's what they do. um yeah, some of them are important. You got to have an overall vision for something like Star Wars. You have to have an
Yeah.
overall vision for Marvel and DC. And so like, yeah, like there are definitely, like, having an EIC I think is an important thing. And the EIC has a lot of influence over over quality and the types of stories that get told. But I just think that there's a lot of middle management in there. There's a lot of corporate nonsense going on that just keeps people employed, which is fine, but ultimately kind of hampers that product. It hampers the ability to tell good stories. The fact that good comic books come out again is like a miracle. The same with TV and movies though, but any of these artistic endeavors that are turned into corporate commodities, it's a miracle that any of them exist at all. With Star Wars, my God, the fact that a good comic book comes out every once in a while, it shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't be possible. But and yet, like they manage to pull it off every once in a while. So, and then the novels are so all over the place, dude. They're so all over the place. Like sometimes you get a great one and sometimes you'll get an absolute stinker. And there's really no way of knowing until you're 4 hours into it which one it's going to be. Yeah, well, it's such a time investment. You can do really, really great things in novels. And obviously the novels kept Star Wars alive when nothing else could. As did the comics, right? Like that Del Rey Dark Horse 1-2 punch in the 90s, it kept Star Wars alive to the point that Shadows of the Empire could happen, and then because of the success of that and the special editions, the prequels, right? So would we be where we are without the novels? Absolutely not. Do we owe so much of that to Timothy Zahn? 1,000%. Do I absolutely detest those books? Yes. So it's a mixed bag when it comes to novels.
I didn't know that. I didn't know you weren't a fan of the
Oh, really? No, I think I've talked about it with you before. I hate Thrawn so much, or at least I did until he was established
we've talked about
Rebels.
Thrawn, but like I didn't realize that you disliked the Thrawn trilogy. Because
I mean, that's so core to that trilogy. It's the Thrawn trilogy, right? Like there's no story without Thrawn. So if you don't dig Thrawn, I don't know that Talon Karrde and Mara Jade can save it. Yeah. I also don't like his characterization of Luke. I don't think that Timothy Zahn wrote a good Luke Skywalker. I think that such a tangent. I'm not going to get into this, but I think that the problem that we have with Luke Skywalker as he is perceived by fans today is a direct result of the way that Timothy Zahn wrote Luke Skywalker in those 3 books. Because I think the way that he wrote him in those 3 books informed a lot of what happens in Dark Empire. And I think a lot of what happens in Dark Empire establishes Luke as a superhero and not as a man that is a Jedi, right? And the movies are very clear that Luke Skywalker is a human being. The comic books and novels turn him into a god. And people read those things and digest that, and they combine that with their memories of playing Super Star Wars on the Super Nintendo and Luke being able to do a double jump with a lightsaber and spin around to cut through things, right? And they're like, Luke Skywalker is this, and Luke Skywalker is not that. Luke Skywalker is really barely surviving in all 3 of those films. By virtue of 2 things, luck and his friends. like if it were on Luke's skill purely, he'd be dead. He would have died at the end of Empire. Right? Like he would have just been his Luke's solution to fighting Vader, which he should have never done in the first place because that was a stupid choice, because he fell right into the trap, right? His solution was to yeet himself off of a balcony, essentially, into a bottomless pit over a gas giant planet. What did he think he was going to do? How did he think he was going to survive that? Just the alternative was to go with Vader. And he was like, nope, I'm going to take this chance. What chance? Luke is dumb. Luke is a very dumb character when you really look at his decision making. And so is Han. And the only reason that either of them survived through those 3 movies is because Leia is the most capable woman to have ever been written. But yeah, anyways, again, topic for another podcast. I think it's in the schedule actually for us to talk about Luke Skywalker, but I all of that to bring us to the most important and what will probably actually end up getting very little time because we're already at an hour 44. Animation, television animation. So TV is absolutely the best format for Star Wars, but live action TV is constrained by budget, right? And our ability to go to different locations and have different aliens and droids and starships and all of that stuff. It costs so much money to create those things in the live action space. In animation, especially as you continue, and if you stay in the Clone Wars style, but even Rebels benefited from this because once assets were made, they could be easily adapted to that style for a lot of things. Character models, not as much, but starships and locations for sure, and droids. As you generate assets, it gets your budget goes down lower and lower and lower because they're digital assets, which means that they are infinitely reusable, right? And the only reason that you need to recreate them is because you decide that you can do better. That's it. Which is a purely artistic motivation and is actually counter to budget. So it's like, yeah, like when the budget allows for it and we can remodel these characters, let's do it, right? Or this location or what have you, right? Let's add more detail, let's add more effects, lighting, whatever. As the technology gets better, we can do more things, and so we revisit things. But animation, very specifically computer animation, because 2D animation is also very time consuming and budget unfriendly. But 3D animation, as Lucasfilm Animation has become adept at, is absolutely without a doubt the best way to tell a Star Wars story. And I think maybe you and I are a little bit biased because our favorite stories are in that medium. But I think our favorite stories are in that medium because of what that medium allows the storytellers to do. So Star Wars Rebels being my favorite Star Wars of all, it achieves that because what do I talk about with this stuff? Like, it's the balance, right? It's action, comedy, little guys, big set pieces, locations, weirdness, right? The Bendu is about as weird as Star Wars gets. The world between worlds is absolutely as weird as Star Wars gets. And 3D animation is where we get to experience that stuff. It's because the budgets are lower, so the risks are less risky, right? So, in that space, George plays with it. Let's go to Mortis. Let's talk about Force deities. Let's create a pantheon within Star Wars. He's not going to do that in a movie. He's not going to do that even in a live action TV show, right? Like that's a risky story to tell when you have that much invested. But if you're doing animation, absolutely. And I think you see this in Clone Wars. You see George do what he always wanted to do more than he ever did with any of the live action stuff. And then on top of that, you give yourself enough time and look at what the Clone Wars does for Star Wars. The opinion on the prequels was toxic to say the least in the 90s and early 2000s. And then Clone Wars happens in 2008 and is initially met with some kind of middling responses and a lot of actually very negative stuff. People don't remember that as well as I wish they would. But if you go back and you listen to those early episodes of Frontlines, that first season, there's a lot of me banging the drum of why is no one watching this show? Like, you guys are all ignoring this show and you shouldn't be. And even into seasons 2 and 3, Matt and I would very often have the conversation of like, people are skipping this, dude. Like they're insane. They're insane to be skipping this. And then with Star Wars Rebels, because Rebels took on that even cartoonier look, well, not even cartoonier, but like more kid friendly, sort of rounder, brighter colors, right? it lost even more of the audience. And there were a lot of people by the end of Clone Wars by getting the 5th season sort of thing, that they had kind of come around to it, but then Rebels lost them again, because all of a sudden it's like, oh well, this one's definitely going to be kid oriented because this is Disney now, right? So yeah, I mean, like, I think that was the only miscalculation that Dave made with Rebels, was like, yeah, they should have just stuck with the Clone Wars style. I think if they had, that show would have been more well received. But that said, like, I love the art style of Star Wars Rebels. It's one of the
Yeah, it's
things that I
cool.
love the most about it.
It's
But
cool. Yeah.
leaning into the Ralph McQuarrie of it, and bringing everything back to like concept art, even Yoda. Like, I know that everybody hates that Yoda design. I actually quite like that Yoda design, because it gets back to the core of what Yoda, over the course of the prequel era, we get used to him, right? He's no longer this little weird green dude. He's just Yoda. He's Jedi Master Yoda. He runs the Jedi Council. Like, he's a the thing that made Yoda charming in Empire Strikes Back is completely missing by the time that you get to the era that Star Wars Rebels is being produced in. So I think the decision to take Yoda back and make him a weird little green dude again, by going back to the original concept art and making him look even more like Stuart Freeborn than he did, I and like really going into the ugliness of that character, because I think they sanitized him a lot. I think, like, you look at Yoda in Empire and Jedi, the puppet, and then you look at what they tried to do with the first puppet, but then what they did with the CG in 2 and 3. And like, Yoda is much more approachable, he's much more friendly, he's much cuter in CG than he is in puppet form. He's much warmer. He's much more relatable as a character, right? Like, in Empire, he's got a bit of a lazy eye, and that's just because the puppet is just like not working properly. But he's got a bit of a lazy eye, and it comes back in Return of the Jedi. Like, I think that the Henson creature shot, like, they got that, and they were like, okay, he's got to have, we can't lose the lazy eye. It's one of the things that makes him Yoda. The janky teeth, the just sort of like jiltedness of his movement and performance, that all makes Yoda charming. Like, that's what endears us to that character. But at the same time, it's like, Yoda's a weird little dude. Like, he's this weird little dude, and then in the prequels, he's not a weird little dude. He's a bureaucrat and a administrator and a warrior, and like, they totally get rid of all of the things that make Yoda in the original trilogy. And I think that then, for Rebels, it was like, we need to make him Yoda again. We need to make him a weird little dude, so that when Ezra sees him for the first time, Ezra's like, what are you? Right? Like, he's like thrown off by Yoda's appearance. And so are we, because it doesn't look like the Yoda that we're used to. I like that's absolutely a conscious choice. And I think it's an effective choice, for me personally. But I also just like that design. Like, I like going back to the concept art and exploring what that would have looked like. Cause like Vader, I don't think Vader is cooler than he is in Star Wars Rebels. I think the Clone Wars Vader that we got to see in Tales of the Empire almost gets there, and if we get to spend more time with him in the future, he might eclipse it. But going back to the original McQuarrie design, giving him that wolf-like face and like the sharper features, and having him able to move the way that he does in Rebels, with that power and that ferocity, I don't think Vader's ever been cooler than he is in Star Wars Rebels. Certainly, the fight between him and Ahsoka is. We haven't done the animated duels yet. When we do them, like, that one's gonna be top. Like, that one's going to be within the top 3. I think. I don't see a way that that's not. It's interesting because I also see that, like, the Darth Maul Ahsoka duel has got to be in the top 3, and I know what my number 1 is, personally, but I don't know if it'll be the one that we rank there. But And I think everybody listening probably knows what that one is. But yeah, like animation is just, it's just right. It fits. It's perfect for Star Wars. It allows us to suspend our disbelief even more than live action does. When we see a creature in Bad Batch, we just believe it, right? When the vines start attacking Hunter and Wrecker in that, what's that, the second episode of season 3, like, yeah, yeah, that's harder to sell in live action.
Yeah.
It's harder to do that in live action than it is to do it in animation. But that's absolutely the high fantasy sort of adventure that Star Wars calls for, and that with the technology that we have now, that George would have wanted to be doing, right? I mean, it is what he did when he was doing Clone Wars. It was like, let's go here, let's go to this planet, let's create a new planet for this. Like, let's explore these ideas that we only got to briefly see in Revenge of the Sith or Attack of the Clones, right? Let's like dig in. Let's see more of this creature. Let's see more of this location, because now we have time to explore it. And now we can like do the fun action figure playset stuff that we wanted to do in the movie that's in the art book, but that we never got the opportunity to because of runtime for a film, right? But we've got 4 episodes. We're gonna do 4 episodes about a Jedi that hates clones, that is actually maybe falling to the dark side, and let's create a completely new planet that's like neon and but it's like it's perpetual night. Let's call it Umbara, right? Like, let's go. And what does Umbara have on it? Man, Umbara's got like these creatures, and like, it's just like, it's a dangerous planet. It's a dangerous planet in and of itself. It's a character within this story, but it's there for a reason, because it's kind of to reflect the darkness of Pong Krell, and like, it just, man, like, and the war itself, and like the sacrifice of these clones, and is this a good thing to be doing? Right? Are the Jedi in the wrong? How close are all of the Jedi to falling to the dark side? How much do they deserve to fall? How much do the Jedi deserve to end as a result of the decisions that they're making to fight this war with these guys, right? And like that's, The Last Jedi doesn't get to have that moment where Luke Skywalker says, it's time for the Jedi to end. And Rey is like, no, what are you talking about? And for him to be like, at the height of their power, this is what they were doing. End it. We don't get that without the Clone Wars, right? That scene doesn't happen. Rian Johnson doesn't even write that without the Clone Wars, because that's not apparent in the films, right? It's, if you want to go digging and look for it, you can find it in the films, but it's really not apparent on the surface in those films. Clone Wars is what brings all of that up and makes the prequels what the prequels have become now in people's eyes. And so people are now able to without shame say, I like the prequels, right? Which they weren't able to before, because the Clone Wars exists, right? And some of the best characters in Star Wars exist because of animation. Ahsoka Tano, Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, Sabine, right? Like Hera, like, I mean, so many of these characters are Rebels characters, but even like Rex, right? Like the whole Bad Batch, right? Like there are so many of these characters that's never gonna happen in a movie. You're
Yeah.
never gonna get the Bad Batch in a movie, right? But you can do it in animation, and you can explore that story and what that means in animation, because we've got time and we have space and we have um uh the ability to take that risk as a result. So the fact that right now, as we sit and record this episode, we kind of know what's coming. Skeleton Crew is imminent, right? Like it's we're like a little bit over a month away from it. But what, I guess probably about 7 weeks. Which is exciting. Skeleton Crew looks like it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. But after Skeleton Crew, there's a real big gap in whatever's coming next. It's presumably
Andor
at this
season
point,
2, is it?
Andor season 2, and then Mandalorian and Grogu. That's really it. We don't know what else is next. to sit here and say that animation is absolutely the best and not know what the next animated project is, it kills me. It kills me. And it's
Yeah,
what makes
it's a
me say,
little
like,
sad, little
what's
scary,
going
little
on?
sad.
Yeah, like what's going on at Lucasfilm that there isn't something right now, that Bad Batch didn't get to be more than what it was, that it was 13 episode seasons, and it's like, and that's all that we got, 3 of them, and that was it. And obviously, I don't care what Lucasfilm says, I don't care what the showrunners say, obviously there was more story there and they didn't get to tell it.
Mm.
And that pisses
Yeah,
me off.
if you go back to the episode of Rebel Cells we did, where
Yeah.
we literally talk about, here are all the things that were left open. Like, there were so many things that
Yeah.
were set up, and then that was it. It's just we didn't get our answers.
Even things that were introduced in season 3 and then abandoned, right?
Yeah.
Like bringing Cody back and then doing nothing with that, right? A thing that the fans have been asking for.
That broke my heart, man. I think
with
that was
for
the
everything,
worst
right?
one for
Like,
me. Was the
yeah,
Cody
like
scene.
to bring him back, and to bring him back in such an effective way, in such a great episode, and then to end the series without ever revisiting that, or even giving us a hint, or even something in the epilogue to be like, don't worry, he's out there somewhere, right? There's another story to tell with this character, right? It what it says to me is that Disney does not have faith in this medium as the path forward for Star Wars. They really need it to be the live action stuff, and that breaks my heart, because that's not how you create a new generation of Star Wars fans. The live action's not doing it. Mandalorian's not turning anybody on to Star Wars. I hate to say that, because I do really legitimately like The Mandalorian. But the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels represent 2 different generations of Star Wars fans that started with Star Wars where they're supposed to start with it, as kids. Right? And those kids, because Rebels is now, it's been a decade, right? Those kids that were 8 are 18. Those kids that were 12 are 22. They are not kids anymore. They're adults. And those adults are hardcore Star Wars fans. They're the lifeblood of the fandom. They're the people that should be supported by Lucasfilm. They're the ones, they've been there since they were able to make decisions for themselves about what shows they wanted to watch, right? And they have stuck with Star Wars, and they have made it a part of who they are. That's what you want. Like, as Disney, that's what you want. As a fan, I think it's dangerous, and I've talked about that before. Don't make it part of your identity. Make it a piece of who you are, but don't make it the whole thing, please. Please, 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 I beg of you. Don't make Luke Skywalker your whole fucking identity. It is only a recipe for disaster. These shows, Clone Wars and Rebels, did that. Even Resistance, to a certain degree, because the people who love Resistance, right? Now, thankfully, Young Jedi Adventures is there. It exists, and it is turning on a new generation to Star Wars. So thank God that no one's paying attention to that at Disney, and that it's being allowed to continue. Because it is absolutely onboarding the next generation with Gen Alpha, because like it works for my girls. They have made the transition into Clone Wars now. Like, we are watching Clone Wars, and thankfully all of this stuff is on Disney Plus. So it's like, even though they're not making new things, at least these things still exist in a way that's accessible, so that kids can get into them. But yeah, the fact that Disney cannot see that is very clearly the most effective path forward. You want these franchises to be profitable, you have to keep refilling that fan base. You have to. Like, it's I think the part of the game that these corporations, these executives have not figured out yet, is that, like, that's the way to do it And the best way to do it, the best way to create these zealots is to indoctrinate them when they're children. The language I'm using is intentionally problematic because I want it to be really clear what we're talking about. But at the same time, like, we love Star Wars and we want Star Wars to continue. And if we want that to happen, if we want it to continue to be as big as it has been the last few years, or I mean, like, I would say to go back to what it was at like pre Last Jedi, right? Before the division started to happen and before Disney started getting cold feet on every bold decision that it was making, right? Um, Animation is the way to do it. Like that, like, it is absolutely, not only is it the best place for these stories, for these types of stories, the high adventure, fun, weird, silly, dramatic, heartbreaking, action packed, like all of the things that make it Star Wars, all of the things that George intentionally imbued into the original trilogy and the prequels and Clone Wars. If you want to have all of those things in balance, delivered the way that they should be, I think need to be, in order for Star Wars to be successful and in order for it to create new generations of fans, animation is the place to do it. It's also going to be the most accessible for that audience. And it doesn't, like, I think that Clone Wars and Rebels are perfect examples of the fact that it doesn't have to sacrifice any of the adult stuff, right? Certainly not every episode of those shows are fun for adults and kids alike, right? But there's a lot of it. I mean, like, this is the thing. Resistance was too much for kids. Bad Batch was too much for grown-ups. They need to strike that balance again that they had with Clone Wars and Rebels, where they're telling mature stories, but they're doing it in a fun way, right? And I think, like, honestly, like, Clone Wars did it the best, but I think they leaned a little bit too much into the sort of high-mindedness of Clone Wars with Bad Batch, and it made a very good show. Like, don't get me wrong, like, Bad Batch season 1 and 2 are phenomenal, and season 3 has some really great high points and some difficult moments, but at the end of the day, it's not very kid friendly. I don't think it's very kid friendly, even though it has this kid as like one of the central characters. I don't think that was enough for them to draw in that audience. Because at the end of the day, it ends up being about these, these dudes, these gruff dudes, and these very, like, difficult subject matter for kids to get into. Eugenics and the post-war veteran support. It's weird. Bad Batch is difficult. Bad Batch is difficult even for us adults, I think, to hone in on, like, what's the thematic thing going on here. It's like, is it being a dad? Is that what it is? I don't think that a lot of kids are really into it. But yeah, they need to return to I think the tone and the cadence of Star Wars Rebels, like 20 episodes, and like 18 to 20 episodes, I think is, like I said, a sweet spot. And one-off adventures mixed with serialized storytelling. I think that's the way to do it. I think that's the way to do it. I think everything that I love that has been successful follows that model, and I'm not just talking about Star Wars. Like, I really think that's, for this genre stuff, it's just the smartest place to play. But do you have anything that you want to add about animation?
No. Yeah.
No,
You
we
nailed
covered it.
everything. Yeah, suspension
Um,
of belief, budget, that's uh, animation is so superior in my
yeah,
opinion. Like, there's not even a contest.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and this is Force Perspectives, which at the end of the day ends up being an offshoot of Rebel Cells,
Right.
especially once it becomes you and I, Joe, and it's a couple of illustrators talking about Star Wars. Obviously, we're going to lean into animation as being the best way to tell Star Wars stories. That our bias is going to be apparent there, but I also just think from an objective point of view, for the reasons that I cited, both in terms of like your ability to tell the stories and then for the stories to catch the right audience for the longevity of Star Wars. This is the thing. Corporations are playing short game right now. Short-term gain. Cut this, lay these people off, announce this thing, never make it, just stock number go up, shareholders happy, right? But this is what makes it late stage capitalism, and that's what's going to kill so many of these corporations. We have already seen it with a bunch of them that have. And one of the things that you have to do is there's a little bit of a trick being played on us, because the big names buy the little guys and then suck them dry and shut them down. And so Disney's not going anywhere. Disney will be Disney forever, right? Disney will outlive all of us, human beings in general. The synthetics will still be they'll probably all be Disney synthetics that take over the world. So, and replace us as a species, a few hundred years from now. So, like Disney's never not going anywhere, but the little things that Disney buys up and chews up and takes what they want and, just kind of like discards the rest, and all of these other corporations that do it. Disney has actually been the best steward of the things that they've purchased, but I look at Warner Brothers and the way that they've bought things like Cartoon Network and then just completely stripped Cartoon Network of what made Cartoon Network so great, right? And some of that stuff still gets to exist, and Gendy Tartakovsky's still making Primal, right? So there's a little bit of that, still going on, but like, I don't know, when's the last time you heard a kid talk about something from Cartoon Network that
period
like set a fire, right?
Yeah.
Because it used to be Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls and all that sort of like Hanna-Barbera that turned into Cartoon Network era of stuff, right? And then that turned into like Adventure Time and Regular Show and a bunch of these other things that kids really loved.
Teen Titans was also pretty huge, right? That was Cartoon Network also.
Was that Cartoon Network?
I
Yeah.
feel like it
Yeah,
was.
I guess it was, right? Yeah, like, I don't know, it just like they do this, they buy up these things and then they chew them up and then they quietly or loudly shut them down in order to affect stock price. And everything just consolidates and turns into like these gross things. But like it like companies are dying. Companies die every day because of the behavior of these large corporations and like the executives that run them, and the short-term thinking that they, like, what's next quarter, right? What can we do for next quarter? And it it can kill Star Wars. I know that people think that that's impossible. It can do it. Disney can absolutely kill Star Wars. They can kill Marvel. And eventually those things are reborn, right? Because they're valuable IP and you go away for a little while. But I mean, like, Star Wars has ebbed and flowed. If we want it to not ebb again, we want it to continue to flow, then like, Mandalorian and Grogu is not the thing that's going to do it. It's not. I think on the big screen, Rey is absolutely the right path forward with that. If you want longevity in that franchise, you have to keep going forward, and you have to do it with a character as endearing and universally loved. Don't listen to the chuds. They are actually a very small number. The majority of people really like that character. So and Daisy Ridley will bring people back to theaters to watch Star Wars. So that's absolutely the right way to go. But I think in order to really get Star Wars back in the zeitgeist, it's got to be through animation. It has to be through a killer show that tells a story that people want to see, that we've been asking for, and that excites the audience again. Bad Batch wasn't the thing. Bad Batch from the outset. Who is this for? Right. That was our conversation at the beginning of it, and then it turned out it was for us. But I think that like they were on shaky ground from the beginning with that, and so it was never gonna hit that height. It was never gonna be the thing that they wanted it to be, which was the successor to Clone Wars. The successor to Clone Wars isn't more clone stories. The successor to Clone Wars is a story that takes place between Jedi and Force Awakens, and is about Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo. And this might be out there, but I think that like at the same time that you tell their story, you are flipping between Poe Dameron and you are flipping to Finn. I think that if you actually centered Finn in that series, that you would find that a lot of the stuff that people loved about Clone Wars would be achievable with that. Because Finn was taken as a child and raised to be a stormtrooper. What was that? What happened there? And Finn came to us as like a fully realized character that we know very little about his backstory.
What happened to him that made him go against the grain? That's kind of what I want to know,
Exactly. That is as important to me in continuing those characters' stories and like the legacy of the sequel characters. That is every bit as important to me as knowing more about Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy and Ben Solo, right? It is equally as important. And I think that there's a really good opportunity to fix Poe Dameron's backstory in animation the novel, what was it, Poe Dameron Freefall or something like that it didn't do. I think that we can just chuck that novel. And the thing is that Rise establishes that Poe was working with what's her face, Zori
Bliss.
Right? And what the novel did was establish that what they were doing was running spice. And that is a problem because Poe Dameron, maybe to a lot of people, is a white guy in Star Wars, but to people who it matters to is a Latino in Star Wars, right? So having your most prominent Latino character in the history of the franchise turn out to have been a drug runner when he was a teenager.
Whoops.
Yeah, I don't think you guys thought that one through. And I actually think that shit might be one of the things that pisses Oscar Isaac off the most. If I had to guess why his attitude changed, it's that they probably didn't shoot it that way. And then it turned out that way. That's what was in the movie, in the final movie. And I'd be pretty pissed too. If I not fought, but like said to JJ Abrams, yeah, I'll sign on to do your movie and this small part, right? Because originally Poe was not a very large part. And then they like expanded it as they went on, as they did new drafts of the script. And once Oscar was into it, they made him a bigger part. They brought him back, right? He wasn't supposed to survive. He was supposed to die at the beginning of the movie. But Oscar's thing was like, I'll do this, but it's really important to me that Poe Dameron is from Yavin 4. And it doesn't have to be in the movie, but just like when they put out a book or a comic book or like the trading card, and it says what his home planet is Yavin 4, because Yavin 4 is it's Guatemala, right? And that's where I think it's his dad is from Guatemala. So he's like, this is important to me. It's important to me that Poe Dameron is from the place that I'm from, because it's really important to me that this character is the, like, I guess after Jimmy Smits, right? As Bail Organa, but like Bail is a secondary character. He's not one of the core trios, right? Is like, yeah, like Poe Dameron is the most prominent Latino character in Star Wars. To make that character a drug runner, I think is just such a slap in the face. So the novel doubles down on that and tells that story. I think you chuck the novel, you just pretend like it didn't happen. They have already done this. Disney has already done this.
Yeah, for sure.
And you go back and you add a little bit more to that story. What I want to see And the reason why like Zori doesn't trust Poe is that Leia's first mission, Poe goes and he signs up for the New Republic, right? Like he enlists when he turns 18 or whatever. And follows in his mom's footsteps. He's going to be the best pilot in the galaxy, and he is, right? But Leia clocks him as who he is, as Poe Dameron, and is like, I need you to go do this thing for me. And like that the whole thing with Zori was actually like it was a mission, right? Because Poe is older than the other ones, right? So like in the same way that Han was older, so like in the same way that Han can have Solo, a Star Wars story that takes place well before anything else that we've seen him in, like well before we get to A New Hope, you have the room to tell that story with Poe as well. And Poe and Ben are around the same age. The other thing that is massively important to me is to establish that Ben Solo and Poe Dameron knew each other and were in fact friends in their childhood. I think that would be a massive way to add more depth to both of those characters and connect them in a way that, like, when we get to The Force Awakens and Kylo Ren, who Poe doesn't know is Ben Solo at that point, is torturing him, but obviously Kylo knows who Poe is, right? That adds so much to Kylo Ren's character, that he's as aggressive as he is with Poe Dameron, knowing full well that like this is like one of his childhood friends. Because I love the idea that Poe and Ben would have like hung out together like summer camp or something like that on Yavin 4, right? Before Ben was shipped off um to Luke. I think the other thing that you can do in establishing that is establish that like actually sending Ben to Luke was the mistake, right? Which is absolutely what the sequel trilogy establishes, is that like right in The Force Awakens is like he didn't need Luke Skywalker, he needed his dad, right? He needed his mom, like he needed his family to be around him, and they were absent. And that's what created Kylo Ren, not Snoke, not Palpatine, right? So I think you reinforce that by having this relationship with Poe Dameron where you get to see Ben Solo not upset, not alone, but like in an environment where you know, because Poe grew up with an awesome family. So I think if you like were to take Ben and put Ben in Poe's family for like summer vacation, right? Like that sort of an idea where it's like, oh, you're gonna go to Yavin, you're gonna hang out with Shara Bay and Kes Dameron because they're friends, right? Like go there because we don't know what to do with you because, you know, Leia's running the galactic government and Han is racing spaceships, right? So it's like, these, you can't come with us for these things, so go do this. And for him to like live with an actual family for a little bit, and for us to see like Ben Solo thrive in that environment, and then something happens and then it's like, we got to send him to Luke. We have to send him to Luke. He's too, like, the Force is dangerous. He's dangerous, right? And so they send him to Luke with all of that. And then that puts it in his head. Like, that's what creates Kylo Ren, because that's the thing of him being like, everyone's afraid of me. Everyone's afraid of me becoming Darth Vader. Well, I'll show them. I'll show them how much I can become Darth Vader, right? And that's where the obsession starts, and that's where that whole thing comes from. I Lucasfilm, call me. I have it all worked out. I know exactly how the first 3 seasons of this show are supposed to go. We can even have some Rey stuff to tie into the movie. I'm less clear on exactly what you would do with Rey that isn't just repeating what's already been done, but I don't know. We can figure it out. Here's the thing with that is that I shouldn't be the person to come up with Rey's storyline. We should hire a woman for that. But Poe and Ben, I can absolutely do, and we'll bring in somebody smart to do some Finn stuff. And that's your new series. If they announce that series, you would have a lot of people coming off the bench to watch a cartoon show. And if you got the voice actor, like if you got the real actors to come and play those the real actors, that's a terrible thing to say. I'm sorry to all the voice actors out there.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Gross. Gross, Michael.
absolutely disgusting. I'm
Gross.
sorry to James Arnold Taylor, Matt Lanter, Kat Tabor, everybody who's ever done a better job with some of those characters than the people in live action did. Yeah, but if you got that cast to come back and be those characters, but I mean, like at the same time, if they're younger versions, it also makes sense to bring in other people. But yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess with young Poe Dameron and young Ben Solo, you'd want somebody else. But what a great show that would be! Oh my god, what a great show that would be! I want it. I need it. Let's do it. Let's make it. Because Ben Solo spending a summer with Poe Dameron on Yavin 4 and going into a Massassi temple and being influenced by Exar Kun, right? That writes
neat.
itself, you guys. And it
neat.
brings Exar Kun back into the canon directly in relation to the Skywalker legacy. Come on, you guys. We get to go to all of the young Jedi. What was it? I can't remember, but there was a series of books, right, with Jason and Jaina. We like grab those, we throw in some new characters. We have like all these people on Yavin because it's like a thriving community and it's the perfect setting. They're flying X-wings and hanging out and going into Jedi temples and stuff. It's such a good show. I can write it. Well, I can't write it myself. I need a writer's room to write it, but I can definitely like help you guys with this one. If anybody from Lucasfilm is listening, I have it's like right there. It's like I can like grab it. Like I can almost reach it, but I can't because I don't have the resources to make a Star Wars. But I should just do it anyways, right? I should just like fan fiction it with a bunch of art and stuff. I don't know. Then people get mad about that. I think that's it. You're not telling that story in live action, by the way. Like just to really cement my point about live action television or even the movies. You are not doing the story that I just described, which I think would be a really great story that would massively enhance the sequel trilogy. It would do for the sequel trilogy what Clone Wars did for the prequels, which the sequels need. They need it, right? Yeah, man, you could flip over to Palpatine every once in a while, see what he's up to. We get like sexy young Palpatine, but then he's like falling apart, like he's
Matt Smith Palpatine.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's just, it's right there. Sam Witwer can come in and he can play Palpatine at all ages, right? Like he plays like a sexy young Palpatine,
Yeah.
and we just listen. I know that Sam Witwer and Ian McDiarmid don't look the same. I don't care. Just like sexy young Palpatine is somewhere halfway between Sam Witwer and Ian McDiarmid. Like do that, and I like basically just put like a redhead wig on Sam Witwer in CG. So he looks kind of Starkiller-ish, you know what I mean? Like, come on, it's just like it's right there, guys. It's right there. Because I want to see like Palpatine, and then like we can establish where Snoke came from, right? Like literally, like just like tell the actual story of where Snoke came from, because you have to set all of that stuff up for this series, because the series needs to end with like it would basically have to end right at the beginning of the Rise of Kylo Ren comic, or you adapt the Rise of Kylo Ren comic into it. But like that would be the end of the show, right? Would be when Ben falls and the Academy is destroyed. But yeah, man. But they won't do it. And you know why they won't do it? Because they don't know where Grogu is yet. They don't know how he fits into that.
Yeah.
And Grogu is more important to them right now than the Skywalker legacy characters.
Mm.
And that's it. That's a corporate decision. That movie in and of itself is a corporate decision, and it reeks of it, and people can tell, and it's not going to do well because of that. Because it is not motivated by we have a story to tell. It's motivated by what can we sell to these people. And that's why the movie doesn't have a name, and it's just called The Mandalorian and Grogu. Because it's like the name of that movie is not a title for that movie. It is a pair of products that we can sell to people. And they think that that's going to be successful. And it's not. It's not. I mean, like, it's going to do fine, but it is not going to make the money that Disney wants it to make. Because Disney wants it to make $1 billion. And I guarantee you right now, without a massive change from what we've seen so far, as that movie as it is right now with that title and as we understand it to exist, it doesn't come anywhere near $1 billion. Not even close. It makes less money than Solo. I guarantee it.
Really?
Like
Wow.
I stake my reputation on it. It makes less money than Solo. Solo was not a financial failure, by the way.
Yeah.
Just FYI, if you look at the actual hard numbers, Solo made its budget back and its marketing budget. That movie made money. Like that movie was fine. It was critically not very well received, and it was part of a hate campaign perpetuated by fucking Russian bots. Not even real people. There is scientific evidence. There are studies about this. That's what happened. Human beings like that movie. Human beings like Alden Ehrenreich as Han Solo. So if you're going to bring Han into live action again in The Mandalorian, you do it with Alden Ehrenreich, and you do it with Sebastian Stan as Luke Skywalker. And I don't know who we're getting for Leia right now, but you find somebody and you bring them in as Leia, and you do not do any of this CG deepfake bullshit anymore. Like, stop it. Stop it. You want Tarkin in something, cast somebody as Tarkin. Yes, Peter Cushing was one of a kind. He is irreplaceable. Tarkin is not Peter Cushing. Tarkin is a character. If Ewan McGregor can play Obi-Wan Kenobi after Alec Guinness establishes the character, one of like the greatest actors of his generation, right? And then Ewan McGregor, this relative unknown, comes in and knocks it out of the park as Obi-Wan Kenobi to the degree that like he owns that role now more than Alec ever did, right? And then on top of that, you can have James Arnold Taylor come in between performances by Ewan McGregor and own that character in a way that no voice actor has owned an established character like that, right? And absolutely destroy, right? To the point that like even footing, guys, Ewan McGregor, James Arnold Taylor, they're both Obi-Wan Kenobi, equal footing, right? You can recast these characters. You can recast these actors. It's
Ray
not
Stevenson is not going to be a CGI zombie in Ahsoka season 2. There's no reason we need to treat every character like that. Like,
and Rosario can play Ahsoka, and Ashley can play Ahsoka, and you can put out The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett and the Ahsoka series, and in between those, you can do 4 episodes of Tales of the Jedi. It's 4, right? With Ahsoka,
yeah.
and like you can have Ashley come in. She can play the character there, and if you do another animated thing, then Ashley plays Ahsoka there, and if it's live action, Rosario plays her there, and they can happen at the same time, and the audience is not confused. The audience is okay with it. The audience likes it.
No one got angry. I mean, maybe they did. I don't remember anyone getting angry when Mark Ruffalo showed up in the Avengers and it wasn't Edward Norton.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit more going on there that we need to dig into.
Sure.
But yes. Yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, I think the better one is when Don Cheadle takes over for Terrence Howard, right?
Sure,
yeah. And I love the way that they do that in that movie, where he walks up and he goes like, "I'm here. Let's not make a big deal about it." Like, what does he says, "It's me. I'm here. Let's not make a big deal about it." And it's like it's them saying to the audience, "Yeah, we recast this character." And now it's like, can you imagine? Can you imagine if we had to suffer through Terrence Howard as that character as opposed to Don Cheadle? Because without Don Cheadle, you don't get to Endgame, and why don't we just go back and kill baby Thanos in his crib, and then he does the the garrote, right? He does the wire, he mimes the choking a baby with a yeah. I don't think that Terrence Howard was going to pull that one off. That was a Don Cheadle. That was a Don Cheadle through and through. Yeah, no. Yeah. Recast the characters. But at this point, I don't know what the hell's going on at Disney and Lucasfilm. They have canceled more projects than they've released. You and I did the math on it the other day. And it is, they've released 5 movies, right? They have canceled at least 8. And some of those have not gotten official cancellations. I will grant that they are not like officially formally announced as canceled. The Rian Johnson trilogy is not happening, guys. It's not happening, and that breaks my heart because I would love to see it as much as the next person that wants to see it, but it's not happening. I don't think that Rian has any intention of coming back to Star Wars until things change massively. If it does happen, it's like 10 years from now, right? I think at the state that things are in right now, he's much happier making weird detective movies and TV shows, and whatever other nonsense he's got that he's cooking up that is fantastic. But yeah, there's a handful of things that are not like officially canceled, but I also don't think Rogue Squadron is going to happen. I don't think that Patty Jenkins is making a Star Wars movie. There's just too much going on there. They're not gonna fix that. Eight canceled movies, and then like 3 projects right now that are kind of like, are they happening or are they not? And the only one that is on solid ground is Mando and Grogu, which is really sad.
Do you think this pattern of them announcing stuff way too early before like these projects even really kind of have any real traction or movement or whatever?
Yeah.
Do you think that has anything to do with why we're not hearing about any of the animation stuff, or is it because there's so few animation projects that go on at the same time in general that like that's not really a danger that's ever going to happen because like they choose a direction and then they just go for it, or are they just like totally unrelated?
I think the animation project has something to do with one of the announced projects or possibly with an unannounced project.
Okay.
So I think that whatever Lucasfilm Animation has been gearing up and working on over the last year since we found out the Bad Batch was ending, whatever that is going to tie into something that's in the works, right? Now, hopefully it's the Rey movie, because if it is, it's a lot closer to what I just described than anything else. Maybe it's tied into like the James Mangold thing, but that's such an unknown quantity. I don't know that they would risk that much of the portfolio on something untested. Like that just really doesn't seem like a smart business move. That said, they've made a lot of dumb business moves in the last couple of years with the intention of making smart business moves, right? So I don't know. I'm at a place right now where what is happening at Lucasfilm behind the scenes feels so chaotic to me that I can't predict what it is that they're about to do. Because the things that they have greenlit, the things that they have canceled, the things that they have gotten behind, and the things that they have that they're distancing from, it's even that has not been consistent, because just recently they announced that Manny Jacinto will be at Star Wars Celebration Japan. Actually, I guess they announced that a while ago, right? But then like in a recent announcement of some other guests, they like reiterated that Manny Jacinto would be at Celebration Japan, and they referred to him as one of the stars of the hit show Acolyte. Now, that sounds an awful lot like we respect and appreciate that this show exists, whereas their behavior as a studio is,
Yeah.
please forget that we made this, right?
Weird.
It's very odd. It's very, very, very odd. So like that, I tweeted a little while ago that when we found out that Ahsoka season 2 won't even start filming until next summer at the earliest, which means that it's a 2026-2027 show at the soonest,
Yeah.
right? That's a long time to wait for season 2 of Ahsoka, a show that was by all accounts pretty successful for them, right? What is going on at Lucasfilm that they aren't able to move faster on getting season 2 of Ahsoka out?
Mm-hmm.
The big answer to that question is that they are putting all of their eggs in the Dave Filoni basket, and I think that that's a mistake. I think that's not the way to do it. I think there's an element of it where it's like, I guess they're kind of following my advice, because one of the things that I've been saying is that Star Wars lacks vision right now, and it lacks a message, an overall purpose for existing that George brought to it back in the day. So that even when things were not hugely successful, you could still point at Clone Wars and go like, this is on theme, this is on message with Star Wars, right? Whereas right now, you can't do that.
Mm.
The sequel trilogy, the 3 movies are disjointed from one another. Rogue One goes in a completely different direction. Solo is the closest thing to a George Lucas Star Wars that we've gotten since George sold Star Wars, and that's because it was Lawrence Kasdan and John Kasdan. And then John Kasdan followed that up with the second most Lucasfilm thing possible, which was Willow. And both of those things were not well received and Lucasfilm has distanced from, right? Which is wild to me, because it's like, these are the most George things that you guys have done, and they are the most like on message things that you guys have made, and you are afraid of them, which upsets and pisses me off. But yeah, like this idea that Dave Filoni is Dave has become what Luke Skywalker became. It's kind of funny, and I think eventually he will put himself into exile as a result, because the legend of Dave Filoni is that the Clone Wars is a masterpiece from start to finish. The Clone Wars is not a masterpiece from start to finish. The Clone Wars has 2 very rocky seasons at the beginning of it, and a handful of really odd episodes in the middle of it. Some of those are George's fault, some of those are Dave. And Star Wars Rebels kind of fails to capture the audience that Disney wants it to have, because there's a little bit of a weirdness in it that people don't expect, right? So like Dave is not as much of a silver bullet as the trades have made him out to be, and that a lot of the fans have made him out to be. He is an incredibly, immensely talented storyteller, and I don't want to take anything away from him on that, but the 3 seasons of The Mandalorian that we have, along with Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka, shows us that he's actually a very inconsistent storyteller when you give him free reign, right? And Jon Favreau comes in and muddies those waters quite a bit, because Jon Favreau is a very inconsistent storyteller, sometimes incredibly adept and other times woefully inept. And it just depends on, like, I think his mood at the time. He's all over the place. I've said that before. I think that Jon Favreau shoots from the hip. He trusts his gut quite a bit, and sometimes his gut is correct, but his track record would be a lot more solid if he worked on his fundamentals. I think if he focused a little bit more on the fundamentals of screenwriting, and hadn't bought into his own hype early on in his career. But I think that Dave has been influenced a lot by that relationship. I think that the Dave that was making Clone Wars and Rebels is a very different guy than the one that's making Mandalorian and Ahsoka. And what they're doing now is like, Ahsoka can't happen until Mandalorian and Grogu is out the door, because that's Dave directing that, and he can't write
Right.
Ahsoka and direct that at the same time. So Ahsoka is going to have to wait. Well, Ahsoka is going to suffer as a result. And I think that there's a reality in which Dave can break the story for Ahsoka and then hand it off to a writer's room that does just as good a job, if not better, on season 2 of Ahsoka than he did. Right. And I mean, like, there were other writers on Ahsoka. I don't think that he wrote Ahsoka all by himself, but not in the way that like the Mandalorian is credited to like 2 dudes basically most of the time. Yeah, it like there's an attitude there that like that Dave is gonna save Star Wars. I don't think that Dave is what saves Star Wars. I like the Star Wars is what saves Star Wars, but um yeah, I also don't think that like this another point that I made, not to go off on another tangent. We're trying to end this episode.
I have to go to the bathroom, so at some
Yeah,
point we have to end.
Star Wars doesn't need to be saved. And when I say that, it's because like Star Wars is just fine. It's making a lot of money. It is at the end of the day making a lot of money. But also like if you have a problem, go tell a different story. Like if you as a viewer, if you as somebody who likes Star Wars doesn't like what Star Wars has been doing, no one's stopping you from telling your own Star Wars. That's what George did. That's why Star Wars exists. They wouldn't let him make Flash Gordon. They wouldn't let him make, you know, the franchise that he wanted to make. He didn't have access to it, so he made his own. He just took all the things that he loved and he smashed them up together. And, you know, that's what Star Wars is. It's Kurosawa and Flash Gordon and spaghetti westerns and like it if you want that stuff, Star Wars doesn't need to be saved because like you can go and you can make Star Wars. No one's stopping you. Literally no one is stopping you except for yourself. You can write fan fiction and that story can exist. You can also just change it a little bit. Just make it listen, Joss Whedon made Firefly. Firefly is a Star Wars fanfic. Okay. And Joss Whedon's a piece of trash. So let's not use him as like an example of how we should be living our lives. But what I'm saying is that like Firefly is hacky Star Wars fan fiction that got turned into a real show that has its own fandom now that is in some ways as big as Star Wars. Despite Joss Whedon being the piece of trash that he is, it still remains as like this massive thing that people would love to see more of. Go write your fan fiction. Go do it. Like it's entirely possible to do that and to make your own thing. And yeah, like there are actually like a bunch of people making careers off of Reylo fanfic right now. So if you want to see it, if you think that you can do better, then go do it. If that's something that you want to do, like if you want to see that exist, right? I don't care enough about telling that story that I just talked about, and mine relies so much on the copyrighted characters in order for it to be the story that I want to tell. But like there are other things like you can just go make your own thing. I'm working on a project right now that'll be announced pretty soon, with a studio called Stillfleet that makes an RPG called Stillfleet, and you guys will see it is very much me riffing on things that I love, which is one of my favorite things to do, and it's influenced by a million things, and it's me taking Stillfleet, which is this playground that I get to play in because I've been invited to play there, and taking a bunch of stuff that I'm not allowed to touch and changing it just enough that I am allowed to play with it. So, you know, if you want to play with the Ninja Turtles, you can play with the Ninja Turtles. No one can stop you. All you got to do is turn them into aliens that aren't turtles, but you can absolutely make biker mice from Mars, and you can make street sharks, and you can make, right? Like there's so many examples of Ninja Turtles is a thing, and I can't make Ninja Turtles because somebody else is already making Ninja Turtles and they won't let me make that, but I can make my own thing. I can make Cowboys of Moo Mesa. I shouldn't, but I can. So yeah, so Star Wars doesn't need to be saved. For the people who are like, oh, is this going to save Star Wars? Star Wars doesn't need to be saved. It doesn't. It's a at this point, it's a corporate entity. What you're talking about is a portfolio of products owned by Disney. And that doesn't need to be saved. That is irrelevant. The art that is Star Wars is just fine, because any one of us can pick that up and do whatever we want with it. No one can stop us, at least not with the current technology that exists. If they let Elon Musk put chips in our brains, then yes, you won't be able to think things without it being a crime. But as of right now in 2024, without chips in our brains, and as long as Donald Trump doesn't get elected in a couple of weeks, please go vote and vote for the other team. Because I think that they are actually a good team that'll be very good at running the United States of America, much better than some of the past choices. But also just anything but Trump, because he is going to just destroy everything. Yeah. And if you're Canadian and we do end up getting an election called, please don't vote for Pierre Poilievre. Please don't. I know that he rhymes things. Just because it rhymes doesn't make it true. Okay. He's a criminal. Just give us some time. We're going to find out. He is absolutely a criminal. In the same way that Donald Trump is, in the same way that all of these guys are. They all are. Man, it's the worst. Real life sucks. And that's why Star Wars needs to have animated stuff so that I can be distracted from real life and I can worry about pretend things. Please.
Yeah. I mean,
Lucasfilm.
That tracks for me.
Tell us what the next animated project is. Please. Now, immediately. Before I publish this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Beat us to the punch and tell us what it is. Okay. Joe has to pee. I have other things to do. So that's the end of the episode. We almost made it to 3 hours, but I'm going to shut it off just shy of a 3-hour episode. I was a little bit worried we might not be able to make a whole thing out of this, but we did it. We did it, Joe. We did it to the extent that maybe we can even cut this one in half. I don't know. Okay. I'll make that decision in a little bit. Okay. And then maybe we can have a week off. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for putting up with all of that. We greatly appreciate it. I know some of you are like here by choice and you actually enjoy it. And that to me is wild. But Joe and I are just here to talk to each other about Star Wars, and then we record it and we let you guys listen. So it's just an excuse for us to hang out. So thanks for giving us an excuse to hang out, and thanks for listening. And I don't know, tell a friend, I guess, leave a rating and a review, all that stuff. But you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. And me saying it at the end of the episode isn't going to change that. Is a reality that I think more podcasters need to realize. Thanks for listening. See you guys next time.
Yeah.
Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV. And join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/thunderquack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network.